Hey friends, family, followers, and subscribers. It's your favorite men of letters and fellow Winchester brother Bradford here to do, you guessed it, another book review. And yes, I'm sporting my Tigers again. We're getting closer to football season. Looking forward to what the season has in store. But that being said, I'm not here to talk about sports. I'm here to talk about my favorite book in the Red Rising series thus far, Dark Age. Now, I finished this probably, I think it was almost a week ago. Yeah, almost a week ago. Great book. Highly recommend it. So that being said, I absolutely adored this book. Now, while it did have its faults, that's not why I'm going to be covering it here today. What I'm going to be covering today are the central characters of the story itself, the prose, and what I thought of the world building. So those four factors will help me determine what my overall ranking of this amazing, tragic, dark, bloody, and ambiguous story that I just finished. So that being said, let's dive on in. This video will contain minor spoilers from books Red Rising to Iron Gold. So if you have not read those books, I strongly encourage you to proceed with caution. Just like in this pandemic, proceed with caution. You've been warned. And resume. First off, we have our characters. Our main five that narrate the story are Darrow of Lycos, Virginia Augustus, Ephraim T. Horn, Lyria of Lagalos, and Lysander All Loon. The prickbag, heir to the Golden Throne. Did I say that? I'm so sorry. Starting off with Darrow, he, like I said in my Iron Gold review, he is beat down. He's a warrior who's no longer living in the idealist mindset that he lived in the first three Red Rising books. He is leading an all-out attack on Mercury, the nearest planet to the sun, in order to try and defeat the society once and for all. However, he goes into it with a mindset of, this is my death. I'm not escaping this battle. But what eventually was a battle eventually turns into a planet-wide siege. And you see the repercussions Darrow has to wrestle with from his past, most notably his relationship with Lysander. You also have to see the impact his decisions have on other people, and you have to see what the consequences of those actions will be, and whether or not he's doing all of these awful things for the right reasons. Lysander is somewhat flipped. His motivations are good. He wants to restore order and peace to the solar system. However, he is completely basing everything he wants off of his grief and mindset of revenge on Darrow. Lysander is also still an idealist at this point. He's basing everything he knows off prose and poems and history. All these really lofty things. Once you figure out where he's going and how he ends up there and why he's there and the journey he goes through, he comes out someone completely different. While I loved Lysander in Iron Gold, he is a prick and a half in this book. You see the awful things he does, how he manipulates former friends, former mentors to justify the ends he's trying to get to. All the while, you find out more, and I'm going to get into this later, of his backstory. and why he was raised the way he was raised. I'm going to leave it there. Now, on to Ephraim. Ephraim is a gray merchant / thief for hire. At the end of Iron Gold, he attempted a very daring mission to kidnap Darrow and Virginia's son from right under their noses. Where it ends up getting him is stuck on Mars, trying to figure out the complex mess that is the Obsidian Society. The Obsidians, like the Reds, have been brutally oppressed by the Golds for centuries. And now in the wake of the Rising, they're just trying to rebuild their society. And Ephraim sees all of the things that they're doing and all of the just awful things that have shaped their lives. He's torn because he has this growing friendship with Pax, Darrow's son, and also Electro, who is Severo's son. But you also see his sense of duty and his sense of morality start to kick in and realize, okay, why am I here? What do I need to be doing to help these people? However, where those choices and those decisions take him, man, wow. You talk about something that will destroy you. Ephraim's arc will do that. I promise. He is very connected with Lyria of Logalos, who helped him kidnap Pax and Electra at the end of Iron Gold. But Lyria has been taken prisoner and is now made a connection with a friend of Ephraim's. And so they travel to Mars to find him and get involved with some familiar faces that I will leave unspoiled. And her story is just as bloody in this book. But you see her character grow. You see her move past the need for vengeance. Those situations she gets into are just so sad. Mars has been left in ruin, and you really see the consequences of the Rising. And it's kind of a commentary on what the Obsidians are going through as to what the Reds are going through. It's similar. However, the Reds, certain factions of the Reds have not dealt with it in as healthy of a way as possible. However, Lyria, I was much more drawn to Lyria's arc in this book than I was in Iron Gold. She was still a little hard to follow, just like Ephraim, because of the complexities in their arcs. But I still really enjoyed their journeys. And lastly, out of the 5 main characters I'm going to cover, today I'm going to cover Virginia Augustus, also known as Mustang, also known as the Sovereign of the Republic. This is the first book we get a POV journey from her. And she's trying to lead disunified factions of the New Republic, and also realizing she's made some serious mistakes, not only in how she's evolved from this idealistic girl who's very intelligent, very smart, very clever and ambitious, into this relatively stoic, passive politician defined by the fears of her past, but also hoping for the best in the future. However, there is one certain event that totally shatters all of these views and brings back old enemies into her story. So I give, ultimately, these character journeys, with some hiccups here and there, I give these character journeys an 8.7 out of 10. And that is great. While there were some inconsistencies in a couple of characters and a couple of their viewpoints, I give all of these characters an 8.7 out of 10. Next, we have our story section. In my opinion, I think this was the best story in the Red Rising series thus far. Reasons because it was dark. I mean, The cover might be kind of gold, as you know from my Jack Klein character examination video right here. I love the color gold, and the front cover's gold. How nice! Wow. But this story is anything but lighthearted. It's, like I said, dark. Boo. It is bloody. There are parts of it where you're just like, somebody could be dead, somebody could be alive, we don't know. Brown deliberately gives us ambiguous endings for some of our characters. And this story is nothing but ambitious, because it absolutely defies all of the tropes of the hero's journey. As I've mentioned many times before, this book defies all of those tropes. And it also defies a lot of the typical story structures that you find in literature. So, all that being said, I rank the story a 9.4 out of 10, which is fabulous. But that takes me into the prose. And like I was saying in my Iron Gold video, see here for more reference, Brown has grown from where he was in Red Rising. His prose is subtle. It's mature. Man, is it graphic. There's a couple of character deaths that are just, oh my gosh. I want to say brutal, but that almost seems like a tame word. Brown describes it in gory detail.
Now, as a fan of fancy prose, I really enjoy this. You might not, but it is really interesting to see how this is slowly and steadily defining what will probably be the future of sci-fi, in an opinion surprising absolutely no one. What I really enjoy about the Red Rising series is how subversive it is. Brown's writing style, not his prose, but his writing style, reminds me very much of A Song of Ice and Fire, or more popularly known as Game of Thrones. The reason is because he'll give you subtle hints about what he's doing and then lay out completely what the story is doing in that moment. However, in Dark Age, that changes a lot, because you will have chapter endings that very much resemble some memorable moments in A Song of Ice and Fire, such as Jon Snow's death at the hands of the Night's Watch, or the Red Wedding in A Storm of Swords. Also very reminiscent of A Song of Ice and Fire in Dark Age is you now have characters on their own divergent arcs. And what I mean by that is you see some characters who are off on their own journeys, who don't really have anything to do with the main A plot, but it's just as compelling as the A plot. George R.R. Martin, like Pierce Brown, is known for making these very compelling central, what are known as B plots, that oftentimes take over the story from the A plot or the main plot, which in Game of Thrones / A Song of Ice and Fire was Jon Snow's quest to unite the peoples beyond the wall and the houses of the Seven Kingdoms against the White Walkers. In this case, the main storyline is Darrow trying to retake Mercury from the Society. Additionally, I know I said in my Morningstar review, see, listed here, is that I often complained about Red Rising's attempts to not go into depth about its world, or in this case, worlds. Iron Gold and Dark Age have very much changed that trope in the Red Rising series, and you get a lot more backstory of the Obsidian class, of the Red class, and especially what the Reds have struggled with since the Rising started. Additionally, you see how far and removed and how complex the Golds are just as a social class, not only as a what they call a genus of humanity, but just in general as complex of a social class that they are.
So, while Brown's prose has improved dramatically from where it was in Red Rising, in terms of you get more ambiguous endings, like I was saying with the story. You get more subtle action sequences written very descriptively. My gripes with the story are still there. It is going at breakneck speed. Things are happening so quickly, and you can get lost in how he doesn't include details. He doesn't include a lot of things that I think make a story special, immersive. Like, for example, I know I'm holding this story to a higher standard. His surroundings are not very descriptive. You only get one map for this book, for one of the primary locations. And then another one, you don't even get a map. You have to fill in the details for yourself. And while that's not prose necessarily, I still have some issues with it. He doesn't describe what other characters look like as much. He doesn't describe their clothing nearly as much. He doesn't describe the surroundings. It doesn't feel immersive. You can get in the characters' head spaces, but it's really hard to be fully immersed in this story. All that being said, I rank his prose a 7.9 out of 10. It is very reminiscent of George R.R. Martin and the prose in A Song of Ice and Fire, which is one of my absolute favorite book series ever. That's still a good score. It's not great, but it's still almost at that point of being great. Next, and finally, I'm going to be talking about the world building. So in this book, I absolutely adored. You finally get some history, which was so cool. And it made sense for the characters' journeys. That's why I've been complaining about this. I wanted to know the history. You finally get some history behind the complexities and the nuance of the Obsidian Society, but you also get some interesting tidbits about the remaining gold society on Mercury and Venus. You get some of the history of how Lysander became the way he is. And it also explains a lot of his motivations. In addition to that, you get new locations. Mercury was briefly mentioned in Iron Gold, but not in depth. You get a very detailed walkthrough of Mercury. And yes, I know I just complained that the surroundings weren't descriptive enough, blah, 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 blah. But you actually get to spend time on Mercury. And while there's not scales to the maps or very descriptive settings, you still get to spend a good bit of time on Mercury. And let me say, it's not a place I want to live. It's still a really cool couple of sequences of battle. And then you get the Cooper Belt. You don't get to see it or read about it because you're not watching a movie or a TV show, but you get to hear about it. And it expands this ever-widening universe of storytelling. You see the Cooper Belt come back to haunt Ephraim and Lyria, Sefi, and the Obsidians towards the end of this book. And then you get some actual names of the continents of Mars, which is great, yay! Because I'd always been wondering, what is Mars like? What's the geography? You get like maybe a brief couple maps at the beginning of Red Rising. Other than that, not really. That's okay though. This one was my lowest score, however. All that being said, I kind of wish we still had maps. I'm a sucker for maps. But you still get some new and really cool locations. And you finally get a little history behind some of these characters and their families. But this is still my lowest score of the 4 categories. I give it a 6.9 out of 10. Now, overall, this was my favorite book of this series. This book definitely took a story to new depths and new opportunities that a series like The Hunger Games failed to do. And why I say that is just because you don't get a ton of screen time in The Hunger Games. You get the first 2 books where Katniss is literally in the games, and then you get the war in the 3rd book, and then it ends. And that's it. Versus in this book, Brown actually takes the time to explore the consequences of a revolution. And that's fascinating. While the gripes of the world building and the history are better in this book, it's still missing a lot. He's still moving at a just breakneck speed, which I know a lot of people enjoy because this is an action book. Very, very much an action book. But it's still missing that immersive feeling that you get when you read stories like Harry Potter or The Wheel of Time or Lord of the Rings or Song of Ice and Fire. Some of my favorite series. Those are my top 4 favorite book series. This book is just, it's going to be a classic. Time will make it become a classic. I'm hoping for book 6 to correct those mistakes, those gripes that I have with the lack of maps, the lack of history, the lack of detailed surroundings. I want that. That's what's keeping this series from being an all-timer for me. It's still fantastic, don't get me wrong, but I want those things. So my final ranking for this book is an 8.2 out of 10, which is great. That is a great ranking. So thank you for tuning in. I am so excited to get back and have tons of book reviews later on down the road. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to be heading back to the bunker, so I hope everyone has a good one. Peace out.